couple of weeks ago, we heard how Australian Dave Warby, son of water speed world record holder Ken Warby, is to be the pilot of Donald Campbell's hydroplane Bluebird when it runs on Coniston Water in 2026. Well, his reserve will be RAF flight pilot David John Gibbs, who was born in Southport and who is a designated pilot for the Longbow Speed Record Challenge, which is being led and built by another David, this time David Aldred from Thornton Cleveley. Now, David has also worked on the Bluebird, and I'm pleased to say he joins me in the studio. David, how are you doing?
I'm all right. Thank you very much, and thank you for having me on.
Thank you so much for coming in. Now, we spoke, didn't we, on the phone, and you're so fascinating. You've worked on the Bluebird. You're now building another hydroplane. Wind back. How did it all happen?
Well, believe it or not, when I was very young, when Donald Campbell crashed Bluebird, Coniston, where he crashed, was part of Lancashire. And they'd no divers at the scene, so they went to Barrow and said, come quick. And the police had no dedicated police drivers. So they went out to civilians and said, anybody that can help find Donald and Bluebird, please come. And my dad's pals were hobby divers. So my first introduction to all of this game was stood at the side of Coniston just after the crash while my dad's pals went diving on the boat. And diving back then was such an infancy hobby, not like it is today. And I'll give you an example of that. You would go and buy a sheet of rubber, lay on the floor, and your wife would draw around you, and they'd stick it together with Evo stick. And in you'd go. And you'd have about 8 minutes on the bottom, and you can't see much on the bottom.
Yeah.
You know, you can look where your bubbles are going, and that's up. You've got about 8 minutes on the bottom when you're diving on air. But so yeah, that was my introduction to it. Then I went into engineering when I was older, and I did a dissertation on Bluebird, and I wrote to the original designers who were still alive then, and they kindly sent me a load of information. And then I kind of forgot about it until Bluebird was raised. And a little while after that, Bill Smith, who was restoring it, was asking for volunteers. So I went, oh, right, that sounds a bit interesting, and off up I toddled. And he took a bit of a shine to me, and I was there working on and off at weekends, sometimes in the week, for about 3 years. And I could see it was going to be such a long project, you know. I mean, we were involved with pulling it apart at that stage primarily, although the frame was welded at PDS in Nelson, just down the road. So I could see it was going to be a long job. And somebody said to me, you know, they're building a full-size replica at Lytham at Helical Technology of Bluebird. Yeah. And I went, you're joking? Because that was only about 5 miles away from where I was. So I went, well, it's a bit nearer that than travelling 3.5 hours up the road. So I got involved with that. And it was truly a full-size replica of the boat. Not a nut and bolt replica, but certainly if you just put the two side by side, you go, same boat. So I sourced them jet engines for that. And then I got involved with overhauling them. We got some gas turbine engineers guys came on site, and they taught me all about jet engines, and what an education that was. That's where I met Flight Lieutenant David John Gibbs, because he was interested in the boat. And
David John Gibbs, he'll be the reserve driver.
He's the reserve driver on Bluebird. Now, also during that time, I became pals with David Warby, who's the son of the current record holder. Ken Warby's passed away now, but Dave was building a jet hydroplane to try and beat his father's record, which stood at 317 miles an hour. And we became very good pals. Dave's over in Australia, and he said, I'll tell you what, Dave, he said, how do you fancy if I kind of mentor you through you building a similar boat to me?
Wow.
He said, because the thing is, when you break these records, if nobody else challenges it, he said it's a bit dull. You've got all this build-up, and then you break the record, and then
what? Yeah.
Yeah, then what? You know, so he said it'd be quite fun, really, if we kind of bounced it between us. And so he did, and he taught me all the way through it. But it wasn't just that. We've had one of the original design team members who worked on Bluebird. He took me under his wing.
Right.
Very elderly gentleman, but a brilliant design engineer, and he taught me all about jet hydroplanes, all about Bluebird, all the mathematics and the technical side to it.
Because you already studied in engineering, didn't you? So this all added. It was an extra, was it?
Yeah. So that was all an extra, and then on top of that, we wanted to do a driver cockpit that would survive all this incident. And I became pals with a guy called Paul Martin, who, funnily enough, had done the same engineering course that I'd done at Bispham, Blackpool and Fylde College. But he'd gone on to work at McLaren, an F1, and he worked on the Bloodhound Land Speed record car and Lola racing cars, and he's working on a 1,000-mile-an-hour land speed car over in Australia as well. And very clever engineer. And again, he came to the project of Longbow and brought all his expertise in composites and
So you've had a lot of experts, haven't you, giving you a help, which is really, I mean, you feel quite fortunate to have that sort of expertise.
But it's not just been that. I mean, we've gone out to UCLan, so we've got students involved. We've gone out to Blackpool and Fylde College, got students involved there. WEC at Darwin, the apprentices there, they made the trailer for the boat. Everybody's been so generous, really, with the time and effort, because we're doing it on a shoestring budget. This isn't a multi-million-pound thing. It really is. You know, if you've ever seen that film, World's Fastest Indian, you know, we're not a long way short of that sometimes, you know, I think. But equally, we do have a lot of expertise. I mean, I'm not going to say how quick Ken Warby went beyond the record, but he did one-way passes after he got the record, and it was substantially, and I mean substantially, quicker than he got the record. So we know that this kind of hull that Dave is mentoring us through and the like is capable of doing that kind of speed.
Stay with us, Dave, because I want to talk about, you know, how much effort goes into building something like that. Let me take the travel first. Don't go anywhere. We'll hear from Dave and how he's building the Longbow in just a minute. It's Nish with you this afternoon. I'm with you until 6. We're chatting to David Aldred from Thornton Cleveleys, and he's been involved working on the Bluebird. When the Bluebird was at Rusking Museum, they contacted you, didn't they? Yeah,
they got a bit of a phone call. Somebody must have said, this lad knows a little bit about jet hydroplanes and the boat, Bluebird in particular. So, obviously you'll appreciate the museum are laypersons in such things, but they wanted to run the boat. And it's a big step from having a static display Bluebird to actually, let's get it going. Because when it came back, it had no engine. And getting it into a state that you call safe to run at 100, 150 mile an hour. So one of the first things was to try and get them hold of some engines. Now, when I was doing the Bluebird replica, I knew of an Orpheus engine, which is the engine that Donald used when he was doing the attempt. So I knew of one over in California. So I got hold of that one, put the museum onto that one. And then there was one which was in a crate at East Midlands Airport that had been overhauled by Rolls-Royce. So, again, I'd heard of that through when I was doing the Bluebird replicas, so I put them onto that one. So the museum have got 2 engines now, and a pal of mine, Pete Walker, who I've known for about 20 years, he looks after historic jet aircraft down south. So I gave them his details. So both of those engines have gone down to Pete. Pete's overhauling them. Gone all through start systems of how Bluebird was started originally and options to start it when the museum come to run it, because there are various ways that you could start it, either by compressed air or by electric start, so weighing all of those up. Making a new canopy. I'd made or aircraft canopy people that I'd been in touch with the Bluebird replica over in Switzerland, gave them the museum all their details. So it was just kind of bringing the museum along, and of course I knew Dave Warby and DJ, our pilot, and they were after new pilots to drive Bluebird. So it was bringing all of that to them. But, and it is a but, I can't run two projects, really. Longbow is my passion, because that is the big numbers.
Because you're in the process of building Longbow, aren't you?
Yeah.
I mean, how much effort and time and, goes into something like this?
Well, it's not, although I said Dave is kind of helping and mentoring, just one of the big standout differences is we have 2 jet engines in Longbow, and Bluebird and Dave Warby's only has 1. So
does that make it quicker then? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, with more thrust. If you stood it up, it'd go straight up, But one of the things, it's all very well talking about the speeds, but one of the things you have to ask yourself is how can we keep the person in it alive, really, in the event of an accident? And my first thought originally was an ejector seat, because they make ejector seats which will go off from ground level and you survive. So I got in touch with Martin Baker and spoke to them. Very helpful. And they were quite supportive, actually. But they said, we can't guarantee, Dave, at what angle the boat would be when the ejector seat fired. And if it's pointing towards the shore and you've got crowds on the shore, then obviously that wouldn't be a good day out for anybody. So from their liability point of view, they couldn't support it. So the next thing you've got to ask yourself is, well, what's the next best thing? And the thing with these water speed records is you could have a catastrophic accident and think, oh, I've survived that. You're in this cockpit that's built into the boat and the flipping thing sinks and you're in it. So we took the decision of having a breakaway cockpit, just like a capsule in effect, that would stay floating. So the main boat would destroy itself and dissipate energy, and you're left with this floating capsule with the driver in it. And then the rescue come and pick them up and everything else. I mean, obviously, you hope you don't have a crash. But so that is where a lot of time over the past few months has been with Paul Martin, doing all this analysis, looking at how hydroplanes crash, the forces involved, which are tremendous when you're going for the outright world water speed record, and how can we dissipate that energy and keep the driver alive. But here's one for you. I got a phone call one day from Preston University, UCLan, and they said, hi Dave, we know we're helping with the Longbow. Have you ever heard of Mike Newman? And Mike Newman is a blind guy who does record attempts. And he's done like cars and motorbikes and offshore boats. So they said, Mike fancies having a drive of Longbow.
Right.
So I took a deep breath and I thought, how is this going to work, really? Yes, we've got DJ to go for the outright record, but Mike wants to go for a lower speed but a blind person record. And he runs a charity, the Speed of Sight, tremendous charity, where they get people in cars that are visually impaired and all of that. And Mike wants to have a go in the boat, in Longbow. Anyway, the university think that they have got the technology to make that happen safely, because that's obviously the key. Can we do that safely?
Safely, yeah, of course.
You're running on a narrow lake, you've got twin jet engines, there's a whole world of technology that would be required to do that.
When are you hoping to finish Longbow?
Well, you're relying on other people, really. When you're asking people to put in time and effort, but if you're asking me when I think we'll get this boat wet, I would be disappointed if it's not at a stage where we could put it in the water next year.
Right, so soon.
So not too long off, really, yeah.
Well, do you know something, David? It's been absolutely fascinating. Why have we not heard about you earlier?
Well, it's the gift that will keep on giving, as things progress, I'm sure.
Oh, you're incredible. You are absolutely incredible. Well, thank you so much. It's been fascinating talking to you and getting to know what you do as well. So I really appreciate it. That was David Aldred there from Thornton Cleveland's. He's worked on Bluebird, as you've just heard, but also working on Longbow as well. Hopefully, Longbow will be getting wet next year. Fingers crossed, eh?
Yeah.
Maybe sometime, hopefully.
Yeah.
We'll keep in touch. Thank you so much for coming in. Right, it is 29 minutes past 4. Let's get the weather.